Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Uzumaki, episode 2. Okay, so I brought it up last episode. I've never read or come across anything Junji Ito related or watched anything Junji Ito related that I'm aware of. So I figured this series was going to be wild. This episode made me go like, oh, this series is going to be nuts and crazy and really off the walls. Like, it's so insane that I'm like, episode 1 was wild, but there was something to episode 1. I was like, okay, I can still, but it's just like, it just went bananas in episode 2. It seems like I also kind of got what I was wondering too, whether or not like, Shuichi and Kirie seem to be like our main through lines, but we are kind of getting other stories too. I'm curious when it comes to the manga, was it designed like that? Where like, I wonder, is the anime giving you more of a through line with Shuichi and Kirie, or is that exactly like the manga, where it's just like it is kind of episodical stories, but like Shuichi and Kirie are still your through line, just like they are kind of in the anime? I wonder is that how it works in the manga too or not? Because it's so interesting, because I guess the spiraling is keeping people from really, because Shuichi was all about, yo, you and me need to leave this town, Kirie, but it's like, well, Shuichi can't really leave because his mom is here. She's going a little crazy, but she hasn't gone full spiral crazy, so he kind of has to stay for her sake. But it's like, weird stuff keeps happening over and over again, but no, like, people are like, oh my god, this weird thing is happening, this is crazy, can you believe this is happening? And then no one really does anything about it. So I'm wondering, is it the spiral making them realize, oh, it's crazy, but they just kind of like, why are you going to school, kid, every day when you keep running into stuff related to spiraling? They're still looking for Azami, and it's like, well, you know what happened to her. You saw what happened, but you can't explain it to anyone, even though weirder and weirder stuff is happening in town. But it's like, yeah, you're going to school like every day like it's nothing, and that's what's so confusing. That's why I'm like, it feels like that's all on purpose. Of like, no, like they're just meant to be stuck in the spiral. And I mean, as Shuichi kind of puts it later on, like, you know what the spiral is, it just keeps drawing you in until you get to like the center. It just keeps drawing you to its center, so everyone's so mesmerized, which is the perfect word to use, especially in the context of this episode, by the spiral, that they're just like, oh my god, that's weird, okay, move on. Especially like the was it Kageyama or Katayama, him becoming a snail. Like, at first, it's like, oh my god, his back is so bulbous, like a snail shell. And then he literally becomes a snail climbing the side of the school. Then the guy who was poking fun at him, was it Sumara, becomes one as well. Which is so interesting. I figured something was up, because like at one point he's running, he's like, yo, slow down. I'm like, well, you're getting slow too. So are you... So the irony is he was picking on him, and now he's become a snail. There's even the teacher that becomes a snail later on, which even then, Kirie is like, oh my god, I can't believe he became a snail person. I'm like, why are you saying that like it's the most normal thing? Like I said, this place is affecting him to the point that they're just accepting the craziness as reality. And I guess like that was kind of his punishment, because he ended up stomping on all those eggs, because like I say, Katayama and Sumura ended up mating, and it's like, well, there's kind of no, like, it's both and not male and female at the same time. I didn't know snails, like, biology worked like that. To be fair, I've never really looked into snails like that. So, but he's smashing their eggs, which I thought was interesting, because Kirie was like, don't do that. And it's like, well, probably should have listened to her. But she was coming at it from the perspective of probably more snail people would have been born, so you're, you know, kind of killing things before they're born. Because, in fact, they had Katayama and eventually Sumoru, like, put in, like, a pen like their animals, like their pets at the school. And I'm like, why are we so okay with this? We also found out the town stopped cremating people, because every time they're cremating people, it leads to spirals, and that's kind of freaking everyone out. So now they're burying bodies. I guess the main reason why maybe it's a traditional thing, the reason why they started cremating bodies in the first place, but it could also just be like, it's a small town, they might have ran out of room to start burying bodies. Either way, they're back to burying bodies. But I can't remember, was it Shiho? Kirie's friend was like, oh, it's actually to the point, like, the spiral has started popping up in other cities too, because anytime someone from this town gets cremated, it creates a spiral. So it's not just, it's seeped into the people too. So even people who leave the town are still haunted by the spiral and are affecting other places because of it. Then there's the Yamaguchi of it all. He's obsessed with Kirie, even though Kirie has a boyfriend and he knows that. But he's like, oh, I'll make you love with me. They call him like the Jack in the Box because he's a prankster trying to jump out and scare people. It's like, I don't know how you thought that was going to make someone love you, but whatever. But then we had the Kirie situation where her hair keeps getting longer and she's like, is it getting longer? And then she starts noticing it starts curling and becoming spirals. She literally puts it in like like twisted up like a together to keep it bunched up, and it snaps apart and curls yet again, which is funny considering the conversation that's happening in classes. The teacher's teaching about DNA, which is, a double helix is what DNA looks like. And with all this spiraling stuff, especially the conversation with the whole oh god, what was it? Was it Yukino or Yukiko? The two lovers this episode, was it I'm going to be butchering names. It's like Korinori and was it Yukino or Yukio? They had that thing in the beginning where those snakes were stuck together and were bound together, and it's like, oh, are they fighting? It's like, no, they're mating, because we find out they're trying to get away from their families because they're going through like a Romeo and Juliet thing because their families hate each other. But you have Suichi kind of explaining like, oh, it's got to be a spiral thing that's making that happen, because apparently Koronori, like I said, I'm probably butchering the name, I'm so sorry. The dude is from a poor family, and they've always been labeled as like, oh, their house is the poor house, but Yukino's family are neighbors, and it becomes this situation of they're trying to delude themselves into not registering the circumstances they're also under, so it's led to fighting between them, and so... But Suichi's like, oh, it's got to be the spiral. Because he's like, right, it's kind of like grasped all these people. And it's like, once it does, it sends everyone down. That they spiral out into madness. So that's happening. The whole situation with Kirie's hair is getting wilder and wilder. She tries to cut it. Well, she had someone trying to cut it. Like at a salon or whatever, but then her hair attacks her. She tries to cut it at home, and then her hair starts strangling her. Her mom thinks she's crazy, or no, specifically thinks her son's crazy when he's like, oh, the hair's trying to stop her from going to the hospital to get her hair cut. Which I also think is interesting too, considering like, well, in her, losing it, Suichi's mom ended up cutting off all her hair, so it feels like very interesting that ends up being the case in this regard. But they kind of have to leave her hair alone, so she's just going to school, mesmerizing everyone in a trance. Suichi's kind of avoiding her because of all the spiral stuff, but I mean, he comes through in the end to help her. But she had that other friend who ended up becoming jealous of all the attention and ends up kind of giving into it of like, oh, I want to be the center of attention. Look at me, my hair's big and everything. Now they're going to pay attention to me. And it's literally sucking up their life force. You can see them getting like thinner and weaker, like the more the hair, like their hair is, and the more attention that it's getting, the more it's draining its host. To the point Suichi tried to come over and cut the hair. It spirals around him and traps him like a net, but he cuts it from the inside. And so it seems interesting that like now that it was cut, it ended up it's not immediately growing back, as we see Kirie for the rest of the episode with her shorter hair, so it never like immediately grows back. I guess like now that the spiral's kind of passed, like it's like, oh, like all that power is gone, so it's not, I mean, to be fair, she never like basked in that glory. It's just a thing that happened. She was just trying to live her everyday life. But a friend is like, nah, give me more and more attention. I need it. I'm feeling tired, but I need more. And the last time we see her is when her hair starts spiraling around like maybe like a telephone pole or a light pole or something. That's the last we see of her. Then you have the situation with the two lovers trying to run away. Suichi and Kirie are helping them, and they're both getting chased down by the families, run to a beach trying to get away, but to no avail. So what do? They do like the snakes did at the beginning of the episode. It's like, right, so we're never pulled apart again. Let's spiral our bodies together. And they twist and contort. And then just like their bodies are heavily twisted. No one can pull them apart. And then their two heads are still talking, being like, we'll never be taken apart again. You can't pull us apart, Father. And then they jump in the water and they kind of like breach like a whale out of the water and disappear. You're like, what the fuck is this series? Then we get another story with the lighthouse. Oh, I'm also skipping over Yamaguchi wanting Kirie's attention. He's like, oh, let me show you the power of my love. My love will stop this car. Gets hit by the car, wrapped up underneath the front tire. And it turns out his present for her was, funny enough, a Jack-in-the-Box. Which, once again, was his nickname. So you're just like, Jesus. But then there's the lighthouse. Oh, that lighthouse isn't supposed to work. It hasn't worked for years, and all of a sudden it's working. And now people can't walk straight anymore. They're walking in circles. I'd assume the thing is you're going to keep walking and walking until you die of like maybe dehydration or starvation or exhaustion because you just can't. It seems like they can't just not walk either. They not only do they walk, it's not even in a straight line. It's in a circle. I'd assume you'd have to keep going and going and going, almost like creating a spiral until you, I guess your dead body passing out from exhaustion would be the end of the spiral, I guess. But yeah, it's happening more and more to people. Then there's a shipwreck because the crew members were so busy walking in circles they couldn't break free. One person was found, the other two are still missing. The kids run over to like the lighthouse and like, which also seems like maybe Kirie's family's okay considering her brother was one of the kids running towards the tower. But then like as she's climbing the tower after them, it just feels endless and endless and there's spirals on the wall. And then she comes across charred bodies and you're like, okay, what's going on here? Her brother and his friend went up further, so she's running after them. And then it turns out they're being stuck because the spiral's keeping them in place. But it's like, because the lens of the lighthouse has morphed into something. And Kirie finally realizes what's going on. The body she saw, basically, when night comes and the light turns on, it extremely heats up this place. So all those bodies were burnt from like the lighthouse getting extremely heated. So let's get out of here. Running for their lives, but the light turns on. The one kid gets super burnt to a crisp, but I'm like, I was like, there's no way they're just going. I was like, I don't think anyone in this town is safe. Like, even if they survive now, I'm like, eventually everyone in this town is going to be as good as dead, or I don't know. But like, Kirie and her brother get caught up in it, and then they start falling as they're caught up in the light, and I don't know if that's them dead. I doubt it, but I'm like, why were they spared? Like, not. Because, like, there's no open space for them to have fallen, but it seems like they're falling, but is that supposed to be them signifying them falling down the stairs backwards away from the heat, or what? Like, how are you okay? You have to be dead after that. I don't know. But then, like, yeah, the lighthouse is still going to be an issue for the town, and maybe going forward, the spiraling, people walking in a circle is going to get worse, and I mean, not unless what she was kind of implying was the heat from the lighthouse will eventually not just stay trapped in the lighthouse. Eventually, it's going to escape and start hitting the town and burning the town too. Not unless that's what she was getting at, but I assume it was just like once again, like the whole spinning in a circle, which also the lighthouse itself spins, so it feels like that's supposed to be. I mean, once again, it's all spiral related, but still. It seems like maybe they're also kind of mimicking specifically the lighthouse spinning, but yeah. And then we get our stinger at the end, which we have Yamaguchi coming back from the dead. So I'm like, okay, cool, we got zombies now too. I meant to ask this earlier on to anyone that comes across this who's more familiar with Junji Ito's work. Is Uzumaki the weirdest, wildest thing he's made, or is it going to be like a thing of, nah, man, this is just the tip of the iceberg. He's made much weirder, wilder shit. I once again, I'm not familiar enough with his work to kind of talk on it, but I'm going to say, this is episode 2. We still got 2 more episodes of like, how the fuck do you get crazier than this? And I'm sure the show's going to manage, or I'm sure the series managed to do that in the manga and is going to do it in the anime too, so. Like I said, I'm still on the idea of like no one's surviving this. Literally everyone in town is going to die. So, but just like where these next stories are going to take us, oh my god, I mean, like those two lovers, it seems like they're still alive despite their circumstances, which is so interesting considering Suichi's dad died bending himself into a like that box, spiraling himself in that container. But I'm like, I guess these two are fine in the way that they. I don't know. That's going to be a lot of my explanation. And I brought this up, I think, last episode where I'm like, will there ever be an explanation for stuff? No, it's a horror, supernatural, weird thing of it is what it is. Shut up, don't ask questions. It's just a wild, weird story. Which now with all this, I'm like, when this is over, I'm going to try and track down the movie and watch it because I'm like, how much of this did they adapt for the movie? Like, what storylines did they decide to cut? Because I'd assume, once again, it's only 4 episodes, so I'd assume they pretty much, I'd assume they had chose to adapt everything from the manga, but maybe not. But I'm like so curious, like, because I don't know how long the movie is. I'd assume it's like 2 hours. Maybe it's a little less, maybe it's more. But I'm like, I'm so curious to see what they did with this live action wise. It's probably going to be even creepier. I mean, you can go to certain lengths that it, you know, without having to use CGI and stuff for like animation or even the manga. But I'm so curious to see how it's stylized and what it looks like in the movie. I mean, especially we also talk about a movie from like 24 years ago, so that also has to be considered too. But either way, like I said, I'm going to wait till the entire series, the anime is done. Like I said, it's only 4 episodes. Once it's done, then I'll try and track down the movie, just compare and contrast. So yeah, that's all I got. I don't know what else to say other than all of that. So I'm very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Gonna have to watch me something a little less disturbing and lighthearted just to kind of be a palate cleanser after this. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.